Are we live? Are we live? Waiting for the guitar show. We're live. We are live. It's working. Okay. Something there you are.
Excellent.
Right. Can everybody, Bill, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can everybody hear us? I think the microphone's on there, so I think everybody can hear us. We're just waiting. Just a short delay. Yes, they can hear us. Okay, so good evening, Brian.
Good evening, everyone.
How are we doing?
Well, we're good. It's Strat evening. It's Stratfest time. Well,
yeah, we're gonna. Have you got a Stratocaster here?
I have indeed got a Stratocaster.
This is a beautiful Strat, guys. Look at this. Isn't that nice?
It's one of a kind. You don't find too many Strats with tortoiseshell pickguards, rosewood boards, and blue, except for.
Was this an influence? Do you think?
No, I deny it.
You just have to take the middle pickup out now.
Yeah, I'll sell it to you later. I'll sell it to you later.
So yeah, guys, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about everything about this Stratocaster, and you can ask us any questions you want. We're going to go really down the rabbit hole. We've got one of these as well.
Here's one we built earlier.
So another master build. These two ones are master builds, and so Brian's really gone down the rabbit hole with this, and we're going to be answering some questions and talking about everything, aren't we? So how shall we begin this, Brian?
So let's throw that one away.
Okay. How should we start this?
I think you should play something so that people can join in.
Okay. We'll play a little bit and then. What was I playing?
I thought you were playing Stevie Ray Vaughan Freeform.
No, that's more. No. But even that's in time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean
that's just pentatonic, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pentatonic.
Just not your usual pentatonic.
With a few extra notes. Hello Ricardo, ¿cómo estás, mi amigo? So basically, this guitar here, Brian will tell you this is not just me. This is a nice sounding instrument, isn't it?
It's great.
It sounds really, really good.
See, in fact, there's the story. Should we tell the story?
Let's tell the story.
Well, so the story is that I had this one first. I think we went shopping for a guitar, and I got this one, and it's a Fender Masterbuilt by Paul Waller, and it's suffered a bit of a mishap because what you get with Fenders is there can be a tendency for this section of the neck to bend, so that this one's curved and then that one's straight, and it creates a hockey stick at the end, which means it buzzes. So I called Paul and said, what's to be done? And he said, just send it back to me, we'll sort it out. And in between times, Ramon had got his guitar, which sounded absolutely awful and rubbish.
Yeah.
So it got refretted and re-pickupped, and it was sounding really good. So
yeah.
So anyway, I had this one done in an attempt to get it up to the same level, and we'll tell that story in a minute. But is it worth talking about our two revelations?
Yeah, so basically, there's two words that Brian and I came up with, and this doesn't apply just to Stratocasters. This can apply to any guitar that you have, really. And what are those two words, Brian?
That the guitar should be inspiring and slinky to play.
Yeah.
Which clearly means that there's no such thing as a best guitar, just one that inspires you. And slinky means that you can play easily on it. And I guess we'll all have our own definition of what slinky feels like, but it's clearly the case with a Strat that if you pick up a dozen in a shop, some of them will bend easily and feel easy to play under the fingers. I got a custom shop one once. It was one I've been looking for decades. It was a maple alder body, which are less common. It was in the right, it was the right weight, and I took it away from the shop to try it out, and I couldn't play a note on it. Just couldn't even wrestle anything out of it. And so therefore Slinky came to be.
Yeah. So the two words, guys, are slinky and inspiring. That's what your guitar should be. If it's slinky but not inspiring, it's boring to play. What's the point of having the guitar? And if the guitar, you love the guitar, but it's hard and it hurts your hands when you play it, it's not slinky, then it's also not going to be good. Because the whole thing about a Stratocaster is that, it's just sort of, if this has got 11s on it, hasn't it? This is 11. So, I can bend up with one finger.
First finger.
But I can just bend. I can hold that. If you're doing Texas Flood. So you can bend it so easy. It's got to be slinky. If your instrument is not slinky, what can we do about that?
Yeah. Well, so there isn't a secret recipe, but in working with Paul Waller, let's talk about the things I did to make this a bit slinkier. So let's start at the heading.
So Paul Waller is
Paul Waller is a senior master builder in the Fender Custom Shop, and he's a bass player, so he knows his way around basses. And actually, what he was telling me about basses was the hockey stick effect that we described here, where essentially this part of the neck is straight and then that part bends, is a phenomenon on basses because the strings are thicker, have more tension, and cause the wood to compress. So he said you see it less often on a guitar than you do on a bass. Anyway, so to make it slinky, I guess you kind of have to start at that end and finish at that end, and just look at some of the characteristics. Now, so one of the urban myths, but it's not really an urban myth, but I think there might be something to be said for it, is back in the day when Fender made these, they bought logs and they sawed the necks, and most of the necks were flat sawn. And what flat sawn means is if you were looking at the end of the neck, the lines run that way.
horizontal.
Well, I'm thinking of a good way. They go down, they go across. Quarter sawn is where it goes, the lines go like that on the edge, and rift sawn is where it goes at an angle, 45 degrees or thereabouts, one way or another. Anyway, why would you cut it flat sawn? Because you can get more blanks of wood out of a log. So it's the most economical way of cutting timber. But in recent years, and I don't know what the time period is, let's say it's 5 years or so, there's been a tendency for almost every custom shop to be built quarter sawn. And
why is that? Why?
And they make them quarter sawn because if you think about it, if it's flat sawn, the neck is going to be more likely to twist, whereas if it's quarter sawn, it's a more stable finish. So as far as Fender are concerned, quarter sawn equals a more stable neck. However, and this is the very unscientific sample, there was a post on the gear page where somebody got together with a few friends. They had 20 guitars, various vintage guitars and custom shop guitars. They played them and they picked their favourite 2 or 3, as you would. And then the following day, the person whose house it was collecting up the guitars and happened to notice that their 3 favourites were all flat sawn. So you'll get people debating the merits, but I think there's a theory that says the flat sawn will have more flex forwards and backwards, and therefore appear slinkier under the fingers. But you could easily find someone that will deny that. And talking of people that will deny it, I spoke to Paul Waller about this, and he said that what Fender did was they got a square piece of wood from a neck blank, and they put it under tension to see whether it flexed more in one angle than the other. And he said that they couldn't discern the difference. Now, whether that's because their sample size was too small, I don't know. Anyway, suffice to say that because I read this article that intrigued me, and because the Strat that Ramon threw over here a moment ago, the maple alder one, sorry, it's not maple alder, the maple ash one, not that one.
That one.
Yeah, that one. Because that's flat sawn.
So this is flat sawn, yeah?
Yeah, and plays beautifully.
Don't know if you see this.
Yeah, maybe they can actually. We'll see in a second. We've got a time lag here. We're in a different time zone to the camera. So I don't know if you can see the lines running.
Check it out a bit.
No, maybe not. So anyway, I've owned over 20 Strats, many master built, many custom shop, and that's the best playing one I've had up to then. So anyway, so long story short, Paul built me a new neck, and I had it flat sawn. So in terms of making the neck slinky, it's an interesting concept as to whether flat sawn is better, is for a better experience.
Somebody says here tag knows tone, and it's actually tag agrees with that, doesn't he?
Yeah. So tag's
not here, but he...
So yeah, all credit to Tag. He's a very strongly opinionated person, but it was an interesting story. Anyway, and then slinkiness comes down to what's the break angle over the nut? Is the nut properly cut? Is it properly lubricated? Because if the strings are sticking, then it's not going to bend as much. Then at the other end, you've got the break angle over the saddles. So the steeper the break angle, the more likely it is to stick as you bend it. And then another significant thing, and Ramon, can you show us the back of your body, please? Yeah, there we go. So the tremolo block. So the metal block in the back of the tremolo, back in the day, it was made from cold rolled steel, and where you see the holes where the strings go in, the string ends used to sit right at the end there. Then at some stage during the evolution of Strats, they started making the holes shallower, so they sat inside the block. And what you can't see because there's a plastic thing on the back.
No, they can see.
Yeah, they can't see the block inside.
You see that?
Okay. Oh yeah, you can see the string ends. So what that means is that if you get an old vintage style block, and Callahan makes exceptional ones, but as do a few other people as well, then the string has more length, which means it has, the shorter the string outside of the playing length, then the stiffer it is to play. So Slinky is definitely a combination of break angle, string length into the block, the quality of the nut construction, and let's just call it the flexibility of the neck. Let's not argue about whether flat sawn, quarter sawn, rift sawn, or whatever. But the more the neck is part of the playing experience, the more it's going to flex. And then, whilst we're on the subject of unconventional myths, I have a theory, and it's backed up by my mate Dan of that other show.
That pedal show.
Yeah. Because we were chatting about this stuff, and I'd noticed that I bought a Les Paul, and the neck had too much relief, so I tightened it up, and it lost its tone, it lost its mojo.
Can I just interrupt you? Guys, you can ask us questions on this.
Yeah, we won't charge.
We're not going to charge you money. On this YouTube, we do not charge money for you asking us questions, and I will never charge anybody any money for asking me a question.
So anyway, where was I?
Sorry about that.
What were we talking about?
We're talking about...
Oh, the truss rod. Okay, so the simple story, I believe that the more you tighten the truss rod, the stiffer the neck gets, because it's more under tension. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Therefore, because necks are an arbitrary construction, a happy marriage of bits of wood and bits of metal, a good neck will be one where the truss rod isn't overly tight, so the wood is free to do its thing, and A less slinky neck will be one where the will be one if the truss rod is tighter. So as you actually tighten up the truss rod and flatten the neck, you can feel the neck getting stiffer under your fingers. So that's why actually finding a great Strat is I personally would never choose to have one built, because you never know. It's a bit of a lottery. If you get a master built one, it's going to be okay. It's okay to very good. But the slinkiness comes down, I think, to a happy marriage of brake angles, which is part of the construction, natural flex in the neck, maybe flat sawn or not, and all the bits.
But this is what it is. You can, it doesn't matter how good your Stratocaster is. If it's not slinky, if it's not easy to play, if it's not easy to bend, if you've got to fight it, then
Should we look at some of the questions? So Deja Voodoo says flat sawn has a little more give in the hand and a thwack. Quarter sawn very stable but stiff. Stiff as an AF, whatever that is. I know. So well done, that man. I think on this channel we pay people to ask the right questions that agree with us. Polished frets inspire me. That's also true. This one, polished frets. What can we say about polished frets? Normally frets are flat beveled on the edge, so we don't do it on the guitar. You do the frets off the guitar and then fit them, but they're just flat with a file, and then the edges are chamfered off. These ones, for reasons that I didn't even ask Paul to do, have got what are called hot dog ends, so they look like hot dog sausages. The benefit being that you've got more crown on the frets to play on. The slight drawback being you've got a bit more fret edge down the end, so as you run your hand down it, it's a bit more of a train track. But to the point, polished frets will, and a well crowned set of frets.
We don't like stainless steel, do we? Do we like stainless steel?
I don't like stainless steel. Do you not like stainless steel?
No, I think that stainless steel, I've heard that because it's the neck becomes less flexible.
Well, it's at the end of the day, you shouldn't actually have absolutes like do like or don't like. What works is a guitar in its entirety, because it all works together. So a great example of that is when you get tellies with steel saddles. If the guitars weren't overly bright anyway, the thing's going to be very bright. So what else have we got?
Deja Voodoo says, I have a lot of thin trem blocks and the sustain loss is a factor. Although if you do have a trem flat to the body, you can create volume loss, trem effect, as well as the usual pitch wavering. Yeah, well, so I have my tremolo flat, don't I, Brian?
Yeah.
And Brian has his floater.
And mine's flat. So on the trem block rabbit hole, I did an experiment. Oh, I'm looking at the picture there. You were about 3 seconds behind me.
Yeah.
So I did an experiment on the trem blocks where I was going to fit a Callahan block, but for bizarre reasons, I'd also picked up a cold rolled steel block from Charlie Chandler's in the UK, and I also had an aluminium block, and I had the original zinc one. And I got really good at changing blocks. I could change it in 20 minutes. I'm not trying to claim I'm clever, but I'm trying to suggest I could do it fast enough to be able to remember the tone. So I put the cold rolled steel one in, and it sounded great. And I was convinced that the Callahan one would have. I put the aluminium one in, and it was a different tone altogether. You can get brass, you can get aluminium. It changes the tone. It's not classic Strat, but it might work. But then I thought, well, now I'm going to try the Callahan one, and it won't be any different to this other one because it's machined to the same spec. And lo and behold, it was discernibly different. More ringing, more harmonics, and the only attribute that he claims is that they're cryogenically frozen, which they do to gun barrels to align the metal structures by freezing at a very cold temperature.
Brian, what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you're going to answer them. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You're going to repeat the questions.
I'm going to repeat. Guys, if you're new here, we've got 46 people watching, which is fantastic. If you're new here, the Guitar Show does not charge you money for posting a question. Okay, you can ask us a question for free. We will never ask you for money. Okay, will we, Brian?
No, we won't.
Some channels ask for you for money. We don't.
So one of the questions was, does fret size make a difference? Absolutely to playability. Does it make a difference to the tone? I don't know. because I've got a preference for a certain fret size, which is a Sanko 6105, which isn't the same size as a Dunlop 6105.
So let's go through how many. There's Jim Dunlop, right?
Well, yeah. So who makes fret wire? Jim Dunlop does. So Fender was using Jim Dunlop frets, and then they started using Sanko from the Far East. And then recently they changed to somebody else. I can't remember the name of it, because Ron Thorne took over the custom shop, and whoever he's gone with now, he believes makes a superior fret, where superior means less flaws in the fret, easier to work, and all the rest of it.
So who do they use now?
I can't remember the name.
Sanko?
No, they've moved on from Sanko.
Oh, I know what it is. Japanese one. Not
German.
German. It will come to us. In the meantime, James Turner says bass plates on pickups. Well, we can demonstrate that.
No, I mean the point there, James, is you'd be absolutely mad to stick a bass plate on a Strat pickup.
Jessica. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Yeah. Who on earth in the right mind would put a bass plate on a Strat pickup, Ramon?
Well, me. I have a bass plate on a pickup. So let me just.
So I don't know the history, but I suspect Lindy Frayling had a big part to play in trying them out. Bass plates being a strong factor in the early Telecaster designs, and Ramon likes his because he does, like many people, he doesn't like the Strat Bridge pickup. The Strat Bridge, back in the day, all Strat pickups were wound to the same spec, obviously varied from one to the other. And the necks invariably ended up being a bit thinner, but if you were Buddy Holly and wanted a jangle, that was good. When it came to the 60s, you either had to crank them up higher or get a hotter pickup or something if you wanted more of a hot lead tone. You've got that one. Matt Schofield used them and loved them.
Yeah, I mean, because Matt Schofield, I think I met him. You know, I'm not trying to say he's famous. He is famous, isn't he? People know. But
Yeah.
I liked his tone. You know, I heard his first album. I thought he's got a good tone. And he was using, as far as I know, he was using, and still does, uses the bass plate on his back pickup. For me, the reason I personally like this is because with the Dumble style amplifiers I use, the Telecaster bridge pickup is perfect, and it's very similar in sound to a Les Paul bridge pickup. When I was plugging in my Strat with a sort of a lower output and weaker, sort of thinner sound, it wasn't really working with my,
So have we entered the world of pickups then? So pickups.
Well, let's see if we've got any other questions here, Brian. Can a 70s Strat sound like a 50s Strat? A 1970s Strat? I don't know.
Well, I owned a 70s Strat and mine didn't sound like a 50s Strat. So there's kind of a couple of ways of answering that. 70s Strats were urethane, so they had this plastic finish in them. The one that I had wasn't particularly thick, and it used to come off in a dusty powder when I rubbed my arm on it. It was a funny effect. The early 50s Strats are kind of twang machines, so the 70s Strats kind of were a little bit further away from that. So any Strat, what is the right answer to that? The problem with 70s Strats is the build quality was variable and often poor. The body finish wasn't thin nitro, it was thicker urethane. The neck had the 3-point micro tilt, which meant that that absolutely essential neck body joint was not only held on by 3 bolts, but frequently had this little tiny screw that pushed the neck up a bit to adjust the angle, which meant that the body wasn't connected to the neck at all. Well, sorry, not at all, but only on one single axis, one single edge of the neck. So So I don't think 70s were revered, but that doesn't mean though that they weren't amazing 70s Strats. It doesn't mean that they won't come on huge vintage premium prices.
You've got those guys like Walter Trout.
Yeah, Walter Trout.
Yeah,
and we all know that very famous 70s Strat from the guy who's just died in Leonard Skinner.
I don't know.
No. Anyway,
Gary Washington?
No. Bill.
Yeah.
So Sweet Home Alabama was played on a 70s Strat.
Yeah.
And by all accounts, it was a pile of rubbish. But that doesn't mean you can't knock out a great tune on it. So what can I say? It's unlikely that you'll get a 70s Strat sounding like an old vintage one, but some of them do. And some of the old, and bear in mind the vintage Strats that have survived tend to be the better playing ones. The rubbish ones tended to get parted out or thrown away. Or
Ricardo asked a question. Buenos dias, Ricardo. ¿Cómo estás? He says, do you guys think that the tuners affect the feel or the tone? We actually had this conversation yesterday.
Yeah, we were debating this. So yes, so they do because of their weight. So it's an absolutely pivotal part of the equation, how much weight you put on the headstock. So people that buy aftermarket tuners tend to end up with a better tuning performance, but a changed tone. And somebody made a device called a fat finger, which was actually a kind of plunk of metal that you clipped on your headstock, because it would change the tone and arguably add sustain. But yeah, the question I asked Ramon, I said, look, I like vintage style Strats, but I don't like the bad parts of vintage style Strats. One of the bad parts is poor tuning performance, low ratio gears, or whichever way around it is. Why don't they make them with a better quality gear in them, but still looking the same? And I don't know. I think Spurs will come quite close, but I think
the Steve Ray Vaughan had these shallow Elite Gold ones, which I have on 4 guitars. I have them myself. They're very heavy. But I personally believe that these are more. I know it sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But I think these are more resonant.
Yeah.
Than like a really heavily machined shallow style tuner.
So the short answer is yes, tuners do make a difference to the tone. It's interesting that Paul Reed Smith, love him or hate him as Ramon does, takes to not covering up the gear mechanisms to keep the weight down on his machine heads.
So okay, let's go to another question. So BV says, BV's working with us today. Rene said that SRV went down a gauge when his fingers were hurting. Yeah, well, I think when Dan Erlewine, there's an article in that book, the book, famous book, and he says that when he met Steve Ray Vaughan, he was using 11s on a high. He was using 11s in E flat, which is very like an elastic band, basically.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how. I don't know when you're in E, and then if you want to put your guitar into E flat with bigger strings, a la Steve Ray Vaughan, for me it becomes almost a different instrument. Because then you're changing the kind of the tone. You've got much thicker strings.
Yeah.
You're down a pitch, it's a lower pitch. Everything's going to change. A lot of things are going to change. Some better, some for the worse. But the tension, like for me, 11s in E are harder to play than 12s in E flat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the tension will be less with 12s in E flat. So it's all about the tension. Yeah. So if you want the Stevie Ray Vaughan tone, just put the fattest strings on that you. So it's not going to give you the tone, but tuning down a half step will allow you to go up a gauge. But actually, most of the Stevie Ray tone is in his rhythm and his dynamics, isn't it?
Yeah. So let's talk about necks, the thickness, and does that make it a difference in the tone?
Yes. Yes, it does. So there's what's going on here with the neck. There's a school of thought that says most of the tone of a good guitar comes from the neck, not less so from the body. The thicker the neck, the more wood it's got to actually ring, which is why you'll probably find statistically a fatter neck will generate a better tone than a thin neck. Then there are those people that go around tone tapping. So listening to the body and the neck and trying to make sure that
Tune it in. Trying to tune it.
make sure that they're tuned to a harmonic of each other, or a proper interval. And that's part of the reason why guitars are a lottery. When Strats are a lottery, because they when they're making them in the factory, they're just sticking necks on bodies. There was a guy in Fender in the quality control department who was testing 50 guitars a day, and he said the best 2 or 3 came from random sources: Mexico, American standards, special editions, custom shops, because it's this happy marriage of bodywoods, which is why personally I've given up buying guitars that I can't play, because I've always found that, which I've been quite lucky, but generally the ones I've kept have been the ones I could play first.
So another question here.
So next,
No, one sec. Right. Laminate or slab rosewood?
Laminate or slab rosewood.
Which is pros and cons. So can you explain what laminate is?
Yeah.
And what is slab?
So you're not going to see this, but
yeah. If you hold, let me.
So that's a laminate. So the fingerboard
Here.
actually is the same thickness all the way around and curves, whereas a slab board has a straight bottom edge. So it's like 2 half moons, if you will. So Fender introduced Rosewood boards, I don't know, 59 or so, and they were slab boards. And why did they make them slab? They made them slab because it was the easiest way to make them. You just sawed the thing straight down the middle, sawed a blank of maple, sawed a blank of rosewood, glued them together, and away you went. But what happened was that they found the necks were twisting, and they were coming back as faulty. So they went with laminate, which is more expensive. So laminate, if you think about it, uses the same amount of wood. You have to cut out the wood that you're not using. It's not a thinner piece of wood. It's not, a laminate isn't bent. It's not bent like a veneer.
So it's kind of routed.
It's routed out. So you're cutting out some of the rosewood. So they did it for neck stability on the grounds that a curved surface was going to provide better strength under glue and tension than 2 flat surfaces. Now, as to which so therefore they sound different, and far be it for me to say which is better.
So what years? What years are we talking? Roughly.
Just trying to think. Late '62, I think it went to laminate.
Right.
Yeah, so it was late '62.
And that was after complaints from dealers.
Well, no, it was when they'd had too many necks back that had faults. You'll find people's theories. I mean, if you actually look it up, you'll find there's 1,000 different theories. But I think that theory holds the most water, because why would Fender naturally adopt a more expensive manufacturing process that it didn't have to? So it's for stability. And I know that Scott Lentz, who makes Lentz guitars, which are fabulous copies is the wrong phrase, that's demeaning, isn't it? Fabulous, inspired by guitars, actually prefers to make a 2-piece neck, because he thinks it's more stable when you've got 2 pieces glued together, that stops twisting and so on.
So like those maple Strats with the, because that's what I would love. I'd love to have a maple neck, but a maple laminate.
Yeah, which is what they started.
Like
they started doing in the mid '60s. They started putting laminate tops on the maple, and the theory behind that goes that why did they do that? Because they had orders for maple necks. They had all the maple blanks, so they made maple tops to put on them. Because why would you bother cutting 2 pieces of maple to glue them together when you could have one? So it was one of these economy things as well.
Okay, Brian, can we just take some questions now from good folk? Everyone's coming with some great questions. First of all, I just want to say, did you know, Brian, that BV, there's a guy called BV here, and he moderates that pedal show. Yeah. And he's moderating us today. So thank you very much, BV. It's really kind of you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we appreciate it.
Okay, so let's have a go at it. Who have we got here? So Brian Garcia. Oh well. Okay.
You can't read out someone's name and then not ask their question. He says, "Guys, you look fit and healthy. What's your secret?" No,
okay, let's go down here.
What did he say? You can't read someone's
No,
name.
no, he wasn't saying it. He wasn't. He was saying something else.
Oh, okay. No, he's just saying.
Okay, right, here we go. Yusuf, salam alaikum. Alhamdulillah. Yusuf says, Ramon, do you find that you have to adjust the nut by filing it when you go up or down with string gauges?
Okay, before we answer that, show them that on your guitar.
Right, okay, guys.
So when Ramon's playing,
Right.
he'll play a few notes.
So you
After he's played a few notes, the nut, which isn't properly seated on his guitar, comes out. So you'll notice after every few notes, his hand slips. He plays a downward run on the neck to get to the nut, so that he can slip it back into place and then carry back on up the neck.
okay.
Yeah.
So I just pop it back in there like that.
Yeah. So don't try that one at home.
Yeah, so what was it? The question was, Brian, the question, do you find that you have to adjust the nut by filing it when you go up or down with string gauges? Personally, I don't, because I just sort of wear it.
No, it's a simple answer. You want the strings to move freely, so if they start to bind, then they need to be filed. For those, unless you've got some cheap guitars or a lot of guitars, that's one of those things that you don't really want to make a mistake on, because you don't want to cut the nut any deeper. You just want to make it wider. So personally, I've always bottled out on filing nuts. But then again, I use tens, so every nut takes tens, so I'm safe. Ramon uses all manner of goodness on his, so but then again, his nut doesn't even stay on his guitar. So
okay, so let's go to another question.
well, we're talking about necks and thick necks, because you obviously got profiles on necks. I think that I might have got the world's only guitar here, because Paul said to me, "What's your favourite? What neck would you like if you could have any neck?"
Paul Waller from
Paul
the
Waller, yeah.
Shop.
So I said, well, this is a 60s guitar, it's going to be Rosewood, but I want it to be laminate, and you can't see this probably, but it's a soft V, and a soft V was a 57 thing, so I've got possibly the world's only Fender guitar with a soft V neck with a laminate Rosewood board, and with hot dog frets, and the darkest Rosewood board I've ever seen. You think it was Brazilian,
right.
and they're very loose fitting truss rods, so that the neck isn't overly tight. So you could all in all say that I'm somewhat pleased with this one. Let's answer some questions.
Okay, so Kitchen Marshall says, what is your opinion on the increased use of basswood instead of the usual alder or ash for Stratocasters?
I have to say, I didn't know there was an increased use of basswood.
I mean, the Japanese...
Well, no, but I will say, as I need to, I've owned a basswood Strat. Did you know that?
No, I don't do that.
No, well, you learn something new every day.
No.
I had a 62, a 1980s 62 Japanese Strat. I bought it for £400, $500. No, I didn't. I bought it for £200 or $260 or something, and it was a pretty good guitar. But I happen to think that basswood it's light, but it's a strange bodywood. It's not something I'd ever go through by choice. If I wanted
it kind of crumbles as well if you.
Yeah, it's like if you want to be rude, you'd call it balsa wood. Right. You know, you could literally scoop it out with your fingers.
Yeah.
So I'm not a fan. But I do like light guitars. So this one is only just over £7, and the other one's under £7, and I've got a whole brace of guitars that are on the £6 mark.
So guitar, what is the ideal weight for a guitar for Stratocaster to sound good?
Okay, so this is whoever said tag. If you were
Can you explain who Tag is first?
So Tag is a member on the gear page, and has a good ear, and therefore which coined the phrase tag nose tone, and just has a personal preference for very light guitars, because he believes they sound better. I have a personal preference for light guitars because they're easier to play because you're not hefting something.
We've come back down to inspiring. They're more inspiring.
But having said that, somebody else who's had a boatload of 60s Strats said that the very best sounding ones that he owned were all about £7.5. So, so you'd have to say that statistically, around about somewhere in the £7 mid-range is likely to deliver the best one. But I like finding great sounding ones that are £7 or less because I find them more inspiring to play because they're lighter. I went to see a 70s thin line telly the other day, and despite being a thin line, it was £8.5, so it made Les Pauls feel light.
Did it sound good?
No.
So this is 7.5, isn't it?
That's £7 7 ounces. This is £7. This is £7 3 ounces. But when it went on holiday to America, despite Corona, it was £7 6 ounces, and it came back
lighter.
Came back with a fatter neck that was lighter. Hence the question: what is your favourite neck weight? And the answer is I don't know because I can't find a good source of neck weights. But it did occur to me that an aged neck would have dried out and would likely to be. And if you've got
a lighter neck equals better tone.
Who knows?
Who knows?
A resonant neck equals better tone, and it's possible that an aged dried wood. I mean, they've started roasting necks. So what they do is they protect it to stop it burning, stick it in an oven and cook it, and it dries out the neck, and it does change the tone though. So I think.
So I don't know what that. Oh yeah, we're back.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We had a quick pause. So Deja asked how many trem springs. It depends on your string gauge and what you're trying to do. But if you're using 10s and using Fender springs, then 3 is right for floating, and more if you want to lock it down to your body. If you want to use raw vintage springs, which are made to be more period correct, so they're thicker and they're a larger diameter, they're softer, so you need more of them. So I have 4 in this one. You've probably got a full set of 5. Haven't you?
Got 5.
Those are raw vintage as well. I have to say that I'm not sure I can hear the difference, but Ramon likes the thing is.
So I do, guys.
Yeah.
And you can only do that with raw vintage. Other springs don't do that.
Okay.
They don't do that.
Yeah. So back in the day, was 10 years or more, Fender always used to stick 5 springs on because they wouldn't set the guitars up properly out the factory and leave it to the hapless owner to sort it out.
So Yusuf has asked me, Brian, how do I set my bridge up? Floating or flat? So I set it up flat, don't I?
Yours is flat, mine's floating.
Yeah,
but you can play and I can't.
No. Let me just I'll just demonstrate because this is flat, so I've only got a down, yeah?
So, as many springs as you want, but if you want your bridge to float, some of you may have seen 3 springs on Strats. Don't know how we get it looking like that. The reason for that is because it's got less tension than 3 straight ones. So it's not because it's clever or anything. It's reducing the tension slightly.
Yeah.
But that's a very common setup with 10s on a floating bridge. If you want to have it flat to the body, you either take it down to the body, or you put a bit more tension on as well if you don't want it to raise when you're bending. Right,
so Ricardo has asked strats that play like butter or strats that fight back. So we were saying at the beginning, Brian, we had 2 words, slinky and inspirational.
Yeah, inspiring.
Inspiring. Your
Three
Stratocaster,
words.
your Stratocaster should either be it should be both two things.
Yeah.
Slinky, which means easy to bend like butter.
Yeah.
Because really, what you want to be able to do on a Strat is.
Yeah.
You want to do those David Gilmour bends, and it needs to be easy to bend. It needs to be easy to play. There's no point in having a Strat that's hard to play, and then you can't bend and express yourself. You know.
And so playing like butter, whatever playing like butter means. Curiously, tellies work quite well when they fight because tellies are harder to play, but they're more rewarding.
Tellies it's like a banjo, isn't it?
I don't mean more rewarding the Strats. They're more rewarding because they're harder.
Yeah.
They require.
It's like a banjo, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's basically an electrified banjo. That's what a Telecaster is.
Yeah. Right. What other questions?
Somebody asked what colour this is again.
Yeah. No. Same colour it was last time. Because
What colour is this?
well, it's almost Lake Placid blue.
Lake Placid blue.
But it's got a bit of green in it.
It hasn't got. Has it got green?
No. Okay.
I'm not seeing green.
Okay.
So this is Sonic Blue, but this for
Sonic
me,
Blue. Ramon can't see this. He thinks this is white. He says you're white
dirty
Strat,
white.
and I say I haven't got a white Strat.
So from my eyes, right? Okay. So
When can we talk about pickups?
we're going to talk about that very very soon. So can you see this? So Prugman says he found an orphan Strat guitar. It was 5 3/4 pounds. It sounds great. Feels wonderful.
That's a fabulous weight.
Okay. And then who else have we got?
What do you think of 61 Strats?
What do we think? Well, C Ray 1 played the 61.
Well, his was a Partsacaster, wasn't it? So everyone's got their favourites. 61 Strats are great. What I found was, because I was going through Strats like nobody's business, that for a long time every Strat I picked up sounded like a famous player. So I picked one up and it sounded like John Frusciante, and then I bought another one and it sounded like Hendrix, and it was a 69 Strat. And at one point I convinced myself that you'd have to have half a dozen Strats so you could emulate Texas Blues, Hendrix, and all the others. But I think eventually I came to the conclusion that we each have our favourite period. Now, whether it's a 61, like the question asked, or whether it's a 62-3, which is what this is, or whether it's a 57 like the Maple one. But Ramon trashed the 57 the other day. He said it's really good if you want to play cowboy jangle chords, which dismayed me, because up until that point I thought it was an amazing guitar and fabulous. And
so I have a philosophy on these guitars here. For me, these guitars were Leo kind of Fender. For me he's a country western player, you know.
Yeah.
So
he didn't play.
No, but he was a country western fan then.
Well, yes.
So I think for me, that's more of a rock and roll. It's more of a strumming. I know you've got Eric Johnson doing, all that stuff. But for me, these were made as like electrified acoustic guitars with a whammy. So the rock and roll was invented. Whereas these were kind of more regal for me. But I mean, obviously you can, Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, all this. But I don't know, for me, these are kind of more of a, how could I say it, more of a, what's the word I'm looking for, primitive design, more primitive.
So I've had a 54. I sold it because it was just too much of that. It was too Buddy Holly and nothing else. That's a 57.
So this is a 57.
Yeah, so it's got a thicker neck. Actually, no, that's not true. The 54 had a monster neck. It's just got slightly hotter pickups.
It's very light, extremely
Yeah,
light.
£6 14 ounces. In case you want to know.
Yeah.
What else? It's got a round string tree, which was kind of the last time they did that. Yeah, and obviously an ash body with all the nice figuring. Yeah, I love that guitar. I used to really love it, but then Ramon told me I could only play 50s rock and roll on it, so I'm gutted.
Well, I want to say this as well. Before we get to pickups, because that's your favourite subject.
No, it's the untouched stuff.
So what we're going to do, guys, before we get to pickups and capacitors, which Brian has really got some amazing knowledge, which he's going to share to you. Don't forget, you can still ask us questions. We're not going to charge you money for asking questions. We're not like other YouTubers. You can ask us for free. In fact, we'll pay you money to ask us. So
BB says, what about the idea that 59 64 are the best Strat years? I think well, I mean that's basically saying Rosewood Strats are the best, which, if you're Buddy Holly or you want to play some rock and roll, clearly doesn't necessarily follow. I don't know. Though basically all the way through from 54 to 69, there have been amazing Strats come out. We've talked about the 70s ones where they went plastic and 3-point and micro tilting and kind of lost their way a bit. No, there's great guitars in all of those years. Worth bearing in mind that all those famous songs that we love from that period were all played on brand new guitars. So the craze for vintage is fine, but they were brand new ones off the shelf. Yeah. So love the V-neck, 9 3/4 inch. So 9 3/4 versus 9.5 versus 7 1/4. What do you prefer?
This is 7 1/4.
That's 7 1/4.
It was, but it was when it was refretted. I think he took it down a bit, but it was originally 7.
So that was 7 1/4. Now it's 9.5.
Yeah.
This one, because Paul said, "What do I want?" I said, "I'll have a 9.5 to 12, please."
So it's a compound radius.
Yeah. Which is clearly vintage correct, because they obviously made loads of compound radiuses in the 60s. Yeah. I'm joking.
Rennie Martinez, when he refretted, because Rennie Martinez refretted Stevie Ray Vaughan's #1 guitar 2 times, only 2 times. But each time he did it, he planed the fretboard. Yeah. So it actually went from a 7 1/4, whatever radius, to a 9.5 to 11, I think. Yeah.
So 7 1/4 is fine if it's really, really well set up. The PRS Strats that John Mayer put his name to play really well. Apparently. Allegedly sounds like I disbelieve it. Apparently, but to be honest, because they weren't bending at the time, you can get a better bending experience and a more consistent experience with a flatter neck. So 9.5 or 10. Or is it 9 or 9.5 or 10? And because I discovered by accident that one of my custom shop guitars has got a compound radius and it actually played really nicely, that's why I had Paul make me for this one. So
Brian, somebody's asked me, why have I only got 2 pickups in this guitar? Can you tell me?
I don't know what. I can tell you.
Tell me why.
But don't expect a sensible answer to that. Because Ramon could only afford 2, made up some story about not liking in-between positions and never playing on the middle pickup anyway, and is playing a vintage-style Strat with a teletype bridge and a Japanese pickup in the neck, which is Alnico 2, which actually happens to sound really nice. But the fact is it's not period correct in any way, shape or form, because virtually all of the Strat pickups are Alnico 5 after the first couple of years. And if you put a softer magnet in, it reduces the output, it reduces the inductance, and you get a slightly more compressed tone. But Ramon's sounds spectacularly good.
Yeah, so this is a beautiful, it's got a beautiful...
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about pickups anyway. But before we do, one last thought on Slinky. And here's a tip, stolen from Guitar Techs. If you take a guitar that's in tune, loosen the bolts on the back of the neck, quarter of a turn, all 4 of them. The string tension will pull the neck body tight into the neck, and then you tighten up a quarter of a turn again. The guitar will then be flat, so you'll need to tune it back up again, but you'll get a bit more. You may get a bit more resonance out of it. So
that's a really good. I've done that. We've done that, haven't we?
Yeah. Ramon wouldn't let me do it until I persuaded him. I told him we already had done it, and then and now he's a fan.
I'm a fan of it, guys. You know, so that's a really cool bit of information there by Brian.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Pickup wise.
Okay, let's go down the pickup rabbit hole. Guys, are you ready for this? Just send us £5, £10. I'm joking.
Okay, so yeah, the pickup rabbit hole. When I was buying lots of Strats, I was changing all the electronics to get them to be as good as they can be. And at the time, I was enjoying Lola pickups. So what I did was I bought 12, and I bought them in different sizes. And what I'd do is whenever I got a Strat, I would find the 3 that matched the Strat. So whenever anybody says these are my favourites, it's kind of like that's no good without the context of the guitar that it's in. So very thin underwound pickups, which I love. Are you looking at my stash? These weren't there as the ones on the top are Abigail's 60 to 63. The ones in the box are some Ancho Poblanos, which I'm not that fond of. But
are they Alnico 2s?
There's 2 Alnico 3s and 1 Alnico 5. The ones that I put in this, which weren't original, are Abigail.
Can we start at the beginning, because people want to know, guys. What would Leo Fender? What were the pickups that first started in there? Were they Alnico 3s or Alnico?
There were a couple of smaller, lighter magnet Alnico 3s and 2s and 3s, but they soon became 5s. Most of the early 50s ones, they kind of jumped from being very bright and underwound, like maybe about 5.6k DC resistance and jangly, jumped right up to about 6.2 at the end of the 50s and got a bit hotter. Fender have modelled Fat 50s on the 59 style pickups, and these are Fat 50s and they're Abigail's, which cost me a few pence.
Don't tell.
I'm not.
Don't tell how much they are. It's crazy.
But
I've never known. Oh my god.
No, but okay. So, but here's a pickup selection technique that I can recommend if you don't want to keep buying thousands and thousands of pickups. What I did to select these was I found a master builder that made a lot of guitars that were available in stores that did demos. So what stores do demos? Wildwood. Problem with Wildwood demos is Greg Koch tends to make everything sounds good and has his own unique style. So you kind of want a more basic guitar player playing simple stuff without overdrives. But if you let's say John Cruz, because he's no longer there. So you take John Cruz as a reference. You want, we've heard people saying 61 is your favourite. So you've got a 61 Strat. You want to buy some, or a 61 replica. You want to get the best pickups, right? So do a search for all the John Cruz 61 demos. I've chosen the wrong example because he used his own branded pickups. A different builder, and listen to the difference between 60 to 63s, Fat 60s, Fat 50s, Ancho Poblanos, Tomatillos, and all of that. And when you hear the pickups that consistently sound like the tone that you want, and it's the tone you want, not best again, you'll like a certain tone, then look up the specs and either find yourself a set or find a boutique winder that builds something similar. So for me, in this sort of 62, 63 Strat, I listened to about 30 clips of sort of average guitarists playing them clean, and decided that Fat 50 sounded the best. So I put some Fat 50s in here.
Abigail Fat 50s,
yeah. And why Abigail? Abigail was a winder who was with Leo Fender from the beginning. You paid £150 upcharge to have her pickups in custom shop guitars, and everything was fine until she decided she was going to retire. You could buy her pickups for £300 a set. Then they started going up in price. Now a set of Abigail's is close to £1,000. Is it worth it? Only you can say. The person that took over from her, Josefina Campos, is now the most sought after pickup winder in Fender.
Possibly in the world.
Possibly in the world. Well, yeah, because there aren't. You don't get pickup. Well, the other ones tend to be the people winding their own pickups.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what I have found is the difference between machine wound and hand wound is the randomness of the hand wind and the air that's created in the winds leads to more harmonics than you'll get with a machine wound. So consistently, I found that the hand wound pickups produce more of a classic tone and a more pleasing tone. That's not to say though that there aren't some absolutely amazing machine wound pickups out there.
Yeah, BV says Andreas Klockman. Have you heard of him?
Yeah.
Andreas Klockman?
Yeah.
BV, so we'll take it on him. Okay, so Deja Vu says a fat A5 in the bridge with a good tone pot hooked up. Sometimes it's very humbucker-esque.
Yeah.
So can I think you're talking about Telecaster.
Yeah, and
It's a Telecaster, that is.
No. It's a fat A5. So this is an A5 and it's fat and it's in the bridge, and it works really well. I compared 60 to 63s with the fat 50s, and the hotter bridge gave it didn't give a, this isn't a Les Paul tone, but it's a more usable lead tone.
So you don't, because Brian doesn't like to have a bridge plate on his bridge pickup, whereas I do.
Nobody does.
I do.
You do.
I do. I just like it, yeah, because. But okay, so Brian, a question.
So then electronics then.
Tell me about that. So guys, this guy here is the only guy I know in the whole world who had crocodile clips hanging from for here, and he was just like popping caps, hundreds of caps, and testing them, and then he went on a database on his computer and wrote what.
So the capacitor in the tone circuit makes a significant difference to the tone, especially in a Telecaster and in a Les Paul. I found.
What about a Strat?
Less so in a Strat. In a vintage Strat, they use 0.1 microfarad, and they get dark really quickly. But if you have a lighter one, you'll be able to hear it more. But what I found was that vintage capacitors, which are relatively affordable in the context of the guitar price, can improve the tone. Now, you'll find all manner of people saying that it doesn't matter what quality capacitor that. I mean, the example they use, I even saw it referred to as it's like having a plug going down the drain. It lets the treble go out down to earth, so it doesn't matter whether it's good or bad. I personally think that's not right, because I think that if you've got a curve of it's leaving the bass frequencies but the trebles are rolling off, that curve has a shape, and a vintage one is going to have maybe a bit of a wobble in that shape, and that will give you so the tone it leaves behind is the mirror image of the tone that it's lost, or the signal that's lost, and that won't be smooth and compliant. In a very high spec modern capacitor, you'd expect a very smooth roll off, but in a vintage one, which is a bit flaky and it's got paper and oil and things are going weird and stuff, I think that can add to the magic. Furthermore, bizarrely, capacitors shouldn't be directional, but I found that if you turn them around, sometimes you can hear a marked difference. And what Ramon was saying was I would connect two clips to a Tele or a Strat, two crocodile clips instead of the tone control, have the wires hanging out, and then just clip capacitors in. And I'd do it over a period of days, and I'd fish them out of a pot, and I wouldn't look at what I was putting on.
Neil, this is hardcore knowledge here. We don't do jokes, gags, freewheeling. We're straight down the rabbit hole, my friend. So there's no messing here. You come in for hardcore knowledge.
This is subtitled What's your favourite brand of vintage capacitors?
Yeah, I mean, you're not coming to this channel for for the laughs and the hoo-ha. You come here for
but
the
actually, no.
laughs.
Yeah, to Neil's point, if you want to get to the what's the key message?
Yeah.
The key message is the value. 250k is the value of the pot, but they're plus or minus 10%, which means that they're typically going to be anything from 230 up to 280. I've measured some at 310 and some at 200, and that dramatically changes the tone. Then the capacitor massively changes the tone. So the quality of the signal varies a lot based on the components they put in.
Okay, so look, Dave's asked to play. So what should we do? Right, this is a really good thing. First of all,
He'd like to hear this one. He doesn't want to hear your
can
guitar.
I just say this? We like this pickup, don't we?
We do.
Why do we like it?
Because it's got a nice piano-like, slightly spongy tone.
Okay, so let's.
You can hear the compression in it.
Okay, right. So. This is a song I wrote 10 years ago, and Brian actually likes one of the many hundreds of songs I've written. He likes one of them, so thank you. So guys, that was our Nico 2.
From his last album.
That was an Nico 2, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So this is ESP made.
Yeah.
Expensive, aren't they?
Japanese, nicely Japanese pickup. This is a Fender custom shop pickup.
Not right, isn't it?
Yeah.
position here.
That was the middle. No, that's the
middle. So what do we say?
very different sounding pickups.
Very different.
These are warm and juicy and compressed.
And these ones.
Those are quite chimey. Still trying to work out why they're quite so chimey. It might be because it's got thin, brand new strings on.
So if we do let's see the difference between the bridge plate and no bridge plate. So this is no bridge plate, yeah. So. Which is quite a nice sound, isn't it?
Yeah.
What amplifier are we going through?
This is through a Tone King Gremlin, which is a small 8 watt KT66 amplifier, single-ended.
So this is the bridge plate. This has got a bridge plate on the bridge pickup. Okay. Should we do the 50s one as well? Do you think?
Yeah, yeah.
So what's in here, Brian?
Those are Abigail Hanwang 50s pickups.
These are the 50s one.
About 6K, 5.8.
So again, it's sort of a different. They've all got different sort of sounds, haven't they? Between the three Stratocasters. This is for me. This is much more kind of how can I say sort of tweedy, sort of what's the word? Trebly, not harsh. What's that word I'm looking for? Harsh, trebly, treble.
Yeah.
Biting. Biting, sort of tweedy, biting tone. Yeah. Well, these are a little bit more mellow. You know.
So there's more attack. There's more attack on the note of a maple neck.
Yeah, they're quicker.
So some people will say that actually there isn't any difference in the effect of the fingerboards, but I think you can hear it on that. It's snappier.
Yeah, it's snappier. I mean, these are really great guitars for, you know.
Well, they were really great guitars for blues until you.
Yes. They got a beautiful clean sound.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I prefer. If you had to have one, Brian, what would you have? If you had to choose one of them.
I don't know.
This one or that?
That because that was my favourite Strat. So this one's the new kid in block. It's only been here a couple of days.
Right.
Hasn't earned its position yet. But I grew up with Rosewood Strats. So probably the Rosewood.
Okay, right. So let's go to our last questions then.
Yeah.
Guys, it's been amazing having you on board today. We've really enjoyed this.
Let's take some questions. We can either go down rabbit holes or we can talk general.
So this is your last chance, guys, to ask us a question. We're not going to charge you money like the other guitar YouTube channels do. It's all free here, so you can ask anything you like, and as long as it's to do with guitars, of course, or UFOs.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you very much, James. Very kind of you. So Dave Mark says middle pickup is the red-headed stepchild.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's totally overlooked by most Strat players.
And you like it, don't you?
Well, I like it, but I take the tone pot off it, which is a common mod. So,
Oh yeah, let's talk about that then.
So it's what you can do is you can put the tone pot onto the bridge pickup instead of the middle, and then that gives the middle a bit more bite, which makes it a useful alternative sound to the neck.
Somebody's got coming with a really cool saying. Luis Vergara Fernandez says, "Tellies say twang, and Strats say quack."
It's exactly right.
Hey, you're a genius, Luis. You've coined a new term. We're going to use this one a lot, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so Deja Voodoo says, the bridge and the neck combo. Gilmore, the goose position. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So
are you going to do this?
No,
For me tonight? You're going to wire this?
Oh, I'm going to wire the tone control for you. Yeah.
And are you going to wire these two together?
Oh,
so I can have it in the middle there.
Yeah, of course.
Can you do that? Okay.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. You can buy, I think it's a Schaller 96 pole switch, and wire up every single permutation you could ever think of. You could have 2 in series and 1 in parallel, and trust me, I did it. But the problem was that after I'd finished doing it, I couldn't remember what all the positions did. And every time I looked at the guitar, it looked like a project guitar, so I sold it. Sometimes simple is better.
Progman says, what's your opinion on the Fender noiseless pickups and the vintage noiseless pickups? Because we were discussing like Eric Clapton's Stratocaster. You know, it's got the 9-volt battery, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So it's essentially, what is it?
Well, he's got a mid boost that he can kick in, so which is going to make you stand out in the mix more. I have no opinion on noiseless pickups other than what a fabulous concept for noisy environments. But you're getting less of a vintage tone from the few examples I've heard. But if you're playing under fluorescent lights, who'd want to be clicking and popping and...
BV says, our moderator BV says, Brian, would you say that the best Strat capacitors for a Strat are 1 megafarad but true millifarads? Not many are true now.
Not many are true now.
I don't understand that.
Back in the day they used to use 0.1, and now on modern Strats they use a much smaller capacitor. What's best? It's all down to your ears, actually. I've stuck with 0.1s there and 0.05s and tellies, and I know why I stick with them, and it's because all the records that I grew up loving as a kid were played with Strats with those things in. So, can you make a better sounding Strat? Of course you can. Will it sound like Hendrix and Clapton? No, it won't.
So Brian, do you remember when you had these crocodile clips dangling from the...
We didn't give that guy enough information on capacitors, did we?
Well, I just want to say, can you conclude? What is the conclusion after? Because nobody's tried more capacitors than Brian, guys. And now he's going to tell you guys, and you don't have to pay us any money, he's going to tell you for free, what did you find out from all those capacitors?
On tellies, I found that Sprague Vitamin Q sounded the best, but they had to be the 200 volt ones, I think, or the 100 volt ones. Well, a certain voltage, because the other voltage didn't sound quite so good. And then, lo and behold, Fender come out and stick a replica paper and oil one in their modern guitars, and I found that sounded just as good. So the good news is, if you're buying a brand new Strat, high-end Strat, the Fender ones are actually pretty adequate. This one, I'm afraid to say, has got one of those thin, round ceramic ones from the 1950s.
Oh, really?
Well, it would, wouldn't it? Because you know.
Did you put it in there?
I put it in.
Yeah. So there you go. See, he's capacity.
But I bought two, and one measured 0.1 and one measured 57 or something.
Really?
You know, they drift.
Right.
Did I mention that they drift massively?
Right.
Which is actually, you know, changing subjects from guitars to amps. The reason you need to change the capacitors in a tube amplifier, valve amplifier, is because they only have about a 15-year life, and they will change value and degrade.
Does the same thing happen in guitars?
There's no voltage going. There's no significant voltage going through. So whilst the capacitor will last indefinitely, you can't guarantee its value won't drift though.
Right.
Paper and oil, you know, the oil has a habit of not staying inside the paper. You know, it's got all manner of things.
Okay then. So that's hopefully that's so your conclusion is that the Fender capacitors are good enough on the high-end guitars, but you prefer the actual original. Find an original.
Because you can buy them for a few pence.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's not true. We buy them for a few.
So you know all these people like doing all these boutique capacitors. Do you think that's all bollocks?
Well, it depends whether you're paying for looks or build.
Right.
If they're building, and
I like green ones.
Is it Jensen that make? I think Jensen make new paper and oil ones, and so that would be a good choice. But actually, it's different brands work better in different guitars. But I feel we're going down a rabbit hole here. So if you want your Strat if you want a great sounding Strat, go and play loads. If you want to make it play well, seat the neck well in here, make sure the nut's properly cut and someone's talking about filing it. Go and buy yourself a Callahan block and thank us later. They're £60, $80, $70 or something, but they dramatically improve the tone. Get the pickups heights right. The Fender specs are all wrong.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit how to set up pickups?
Go and get a good book on it, but the way I do it is I set the neck first, I adjust the treble side until I get the most pleasing tone, then I adjust the bass side to balance, and then I adjust all the other two pickups to match volume wise, and then I just tweak them a little bit. And the best sounding position is typically within a quarter of a turn, and if you go outside of that, you lose some of the tone. And 90% of the Strats I see never have the pickup set. So you've got a dramatic tone improvement. So what you should do is measure where they are now so that you can get back to it, and then just have at it with a screwdriver.
Right.
Because it's not damaging. It is beneficial to your ears. If you look at Ramones that we've set up, it's bizarre. Why is it bizarre? Because it's completely flat to the pick guard on the bass side, and about 3 millimeters, 4 millimeters off on the treble side, to give a balanced sound that has the most harmonics.
Right. Okay. So somebody's asked. A guy called Flipside CT has asked, what would the rating be for the worst Strat to the best Strat based on where they are made? Country in brackets. But I mean that's a bit of a crazy question. I don't think that's. Let me ask you a question, Brian. So
we'll answer that. If we're talking Fenders, then the Fender Custom Shop has to be making the best Strats in the Master Builders section consistently. And where are the worst ones? You get dogs everywhere.
Yeah.
They can come out.
This was a dog, wasn't it?
This guitar was
a £5,000 dog.
Was almost unplayable.
It was a £5,000 dog.
Yeah. It's come back to life in a way that is unimaginable. But yeah, so the worst guitars happen because the woods just don't live well with each other. Necks don't fit. Everything's wrong. You pick up a guitar in a store, and literally 25% of Fenders, when you do that, you'll just get a thin zingy sound with no bottom end and no ringing. So literally 25% of guitars are pretty poor in stores.
So strum the guitar. Don't plug the guitar in.
I just walk past them and just do that.
And then you can hear.
You can hear whether it's ringing or not. And I'll come back to the ones that ring. And literally, I went to a custom shop display once and I played they had 50. I got them to show me what they thought were the best 5, and the best one was quite good. So that it's a lottery. But bear in mind, the best guitar is the one. If actually having a pink guitar with a turquoise pickguard makes you want to play it all the time, then that is really the best guitar, regardless of how it sounds.
Because it's got to be inspiring.
Yeah.
And it's got to be slinky.
Yeah.
That's our 2 top tips, guys, for top tips for Stratocasters. Now, we've got one last question from BB. Capacitors generally have a variance of 1%, but pots can vary from 20% to 25%.
Yeah.
So what about just pots? Do you just want to talk about pots? What K pots do you put in a Strat?
Well, the spec is 250, but if you buy a bunch of CTS pots, they'll range from 210 up to 300. And it's a case of matching them to the guitar, but that's quite a complicated, so it's not complicated, it's a tedious process. There is a very technical, sorry, it's not very technical, you could hang a second one off to tune the value to your liking, and then go and search for one that matches that value. That would be pretty extreme. Some of us haven't been known to do that. I bought a bag of 20 with different values, and if the guitar's sounding a bit bright, I'll stick a larger valued pot in it, and if it's sounding a bit dark, I'll stick a. Yeah, so bear in mind the value of the volume pot changes the tone of the guitar. It's not just about the tone controls; it's the volume pot changes it.
Yeah.
But you're right, BV. The values are all over the place.
So one question I want to ask you, Brian, is why Fender? Why don't you look at some of I personally, my favourite make is ESP Navigator.
Yeah.
You know, I like ESP Navigator.
Why do I like Fenders?
Why do you go to Fender? Why not another boutique maker? For example, who makes boutique?
Well, yeah, okay. So in my limited experience, I've owned Anderson, Suhr, Lentz, GVCG,
SVL,
and played SVLs, and why have I come back to Fenders? Because all of those guitars improve upon the original. They're all a better guitar, and you probably put PRS at the top of that pile for making the best new version of the guitar. But along the way, they change the tone. So all the tones that, when I mentioned, all the tones that I'm looking for from the vintage style sounds that I'm listening to disappear when you put clever locking tuners and fancy neck joints and active pickups and all the rest of it. So the reason I don't go for the boutique builders anymore is because they don't sound quite as authentic as the original thing. Now, I would put money on the fact though that if you've got a builder who makes classic Strats, Nash is a case in point. And
I've had Nash.
Yeah. So there's no reason why that would sound any different to a Fender because there's nothing magical about the construction.
Right. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our lovely supporters?
To our viewer.
Our viewer. Our lovely viewer. No, viewers. No, how many viewers have we got? We've got 55. What do you got?
Yeah, well, what I would say is we're sorry about last night. The technology had us talking to ourselves rather than to camera because the camera didn't work, so that was a bit of a pain. We didn't advertise this one because we didn't want to upset people twice. Yeah. So you're a select, carefully chosen crew.
Yeah.
Ibanez and all the Yamahas. Yeah, I mean, there's something. Ramon likes those because they're different.
Japanese.
They're very well made.
I love the Japanese.
Japanese don't like relic guitars. Ramon is a relicking machine.
If you give me £20 English, Her Majesty sterling, send me a guitar and I'll mess it up for you for free. Well, for £20.
Yeah, and you won't even be doing it purposefully. It'll happen within the first 2 hours. Things happen to fall on Ramon's guitars.
I think it's my fat hands, my fat useless hands.
Yeah.
What else? I think we've said everything, haven't we? Is there anything we've missed out on Strats? Because this is a great reference video. We're going to lift this video up so that if you really want to know and go down a rabbit hole on Strats, is there anything else, Brian, that you've missed?
There's a magic one.
Okay.
If you ever fancy getting a tortoiseshell pickguard, don't put cream pickup covers in. It just looks rubbish. So I said to him, I said, I'm taking this off. It looks rubbish. So we kind of, why does it look rubbish? It should look okay. And so then I put parchment white ones in and it looked fine.
Yeah, so these have to be white for it to work against a.
Yeah.
You know, guys, you should think about if you want to be like Brian and I, and the Guitar Show channel. Get one of these scratch plates, and then we'll know. It's like we'll have a secret code amongst us. If you've got one of these scratch plates, you're one of us. Yeah.
Well, on that thought,
Should we?
should we play out? Oh,
Should we play out?
songs?
So, and Roman hasn't mentioned navigators yet.
No, he's not allowed. He's not allowed to.
I'm not allowed.
One of the conditions was that we were only going to talk Fenders.
Fender, Fender. No, I mean navigator. What can I say, guys? I just want to say the reason why I like navigator is because my first proper job was I was a trawlerman outside of Lowestoft. I was a deep sea fisherman on a trawler, 7-man trawler. So I was on the sea, and also my hero is Walter Raleigh. You know, from Elizabeth the First Court. So and he was a navigator.
Okay.
So I love another navigator was John. You know the mystic, occultist, Elizabeth First. John Dee.
Yeah.
John Dee. He was a navigator as well. So. Anyway, I digress. We'll finish. What should we finish on? What song? What's a nice song to finish on? Let's play these guys out.
I don't know.
Oh, Little Wing. Should we do Little Wing? We haven't done that for a while.
Yeah.
Make sure your volume control is really loose. Do you feel how loose that is?
It's loosey goosey.
Yeah, loose as a goose. So guys, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for turning up. This has been amazing to hear Brian. Brian's going to be back again. We're going to be talking about some other crazy thing.
I thought we'd talk about how to relic screws that you can't see.
Oh yeah, screws. Yeah.
No, we're not going to talk about screws.
We're going to talk about something. We'll find effects pedals. We'll go down the effects pedal thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we do that?
We could. We have got a few effects pedals.
So next time I meet Brian, we're going to hang out and talk about effects pedals. You know, which is not my forte because as you know, I don't have many effects pedals, do I? You know, I'm not really an effects person like you are. Yeah.
No.
So guys, thanks a lot for tuning in. It's been really great. BV, thank you BV for moderating. One of the best moderators in the business.
The best.
You know, he runs all the famous channels. And yeah, great. Thanks guys, God bless. And we're going to see you soon, yeah?
Yeah.
Take care.